For this webinar, we will be looking at concluding a course, and we have our concluding a course tip sheet. Jeannie linked to this tip sheet in the email she sent out about an hour ago. And so, like I said, we're going to start with reviewing how to complete grading, then we'll move on to processing incompletes, understanding course availability, and we'll wrap up with limiting content availability for students. Then we'll move on to some questions. So I am going to go to my demo course in Canvas. And so here's a course I'll use for some demonstrations. I just got to move a couple things around on my other monitor so I have my notes up. Oh, I want that over here. Perfect. Okay, so the Canvas gradebook. To access the Canvas gradebook, we'll open Grades from the course navigation menu. And at this point in the semester, we want to pay careful attention to missing, ungraded, or unposted activities. When a grade is considered missing, it is noted by a dash in the gradebook. These dashes are not zeros. So for missing grades, these grades are not impacting a student's final grade. What this means is for a student with many missing grades, if these have not been replaced with zero, that student's course total is going to look higher than it is in reality because it's not being averaged with all of the zeros from their missing assignments. So you will want to either manually go through and change all of these dashes to zeros where appropriate, or you may have already enabled what's called a missing grade policy. This missing grade policy is accessible in your gradebook settings, and you can select to automatically apply a grade for missing submissions. For whatever reason, this default is 100%. My guess is you don't want to give 100% automatically for a missing grade, so you'd want to change that to 0 most likely. And so you can apply this setting, and that should automatically change your dashes to zeros. The one thing with this automated setting is that unless an activity has a due date, Canvas won't know if it's missing. So if you have something that's open all semester and there has been no due date posted, Canvas will look at that as just something that the student has not yet submitted. But once the due date has passed and nothing has been submitted by that point, that's when Canvas knows that it is considered a missing grade. So this automatic setting is only going to work for assignments that have a due date that has passed already and the student has not submitted anything before that due date. If they submit after the due date, the gradebook will mark it as late, and it is either auto-graded if it was like something like a multiple choice quiz or something that you'd have to manually grade. So that is missing grades. Ungraded activities will appear as this paper icon with a little mark. I think it's a tiny exclamation point. And that is noting that something has been submitted but has not yet been graded. You will see this for any activity that requires manual grading, like assignments, discussions, and quizzes if you use some sort of open-ended question type like an essay question. To note, if you have a quiz activity that's built with multiple choice or true-false questions that are automatically graded, but you also include an essay question, you will see this in your gradebook still. You'll still have to go through and manually grade those essay questions. Now, the last piece in this is unposted activities. So these are grades that you have posted or listed in the gradebook, but have not posted or made available to students. And you'll notice these unposted activities because they'll be marked with an I that's crossed out at the column title of that gradebook item. These grades are not yet visible to students, but they are still impacting the student's overall course grade. And so you want to make these available to students by manually posting these grades so the students can at least see what they've earned on those assessments. But when you post these grades, their course total is not going to change since that's already being calculated into that course total. To manually post the grades, you will click the three dots in line with that gradebook item title and select the post grades option. Now, if you are giving any sort of extra credit activity or assignment, you'll also want to make sure those are graded by this point in the semester. Our advanced grading tip sheet includes much more detailed information on the different types of, or different, what's the word? I've lost the word. Approaches you can take to awarding extra credit in your course. And it's going to vary depending on how you have your individual gradebook set up. So we're not going to go into that in much detail in this training, but we do have those resources available and you're still welcome to answer questions. And Jeannie just posted the advanced gradebook tip sheet in our chat if you wanted to take a peek at that. Now, something in Canvas that you may not be aware of, since this is definitely a feature that is very different than Moodle, so there's something called a course grading scheme in Canvas. And this grading scheme is essentially taking a quantitative course total and aligning it with some sort of letter grade. This course grading scheme is visible in your course settings. So if you open settings and scroll down to grading scheme, you'll see that there's a default Canvas grading scheme enabled. I believe the title is changed in the spring template, and I know it has for the summer and fall 25 template. We now call it the default grading scheme. But this grading scheme, I'm going to click to view it, is showing that we're grading by percentages and the letter grades that each percentage range represents. You should be checking this grading scheme to make sure it aligns with what you have listed in your syllabus for what grades students need to earn for a specific letter grade. So this, I think the default grading scheme is either identical or very similar to this grade breakdown. And so this is our standard grading scheme. And in most cases, your syllabus will align with this default grading scheme. But in instances where it doesn't, that means the Canvas course total is not going to match your syllabus. And so we want to fix that. You can make custom grading schemes in your courses by selecting the new grading scheme option. And you could choose to grade by percentage or points. The term points here, I think, is somewhat misleading in that it's referring to GPA points, not to points earned in an assessment. And so with the points-based grading scheme, the highest range is 100 points. So let's say if you have a point-based grade book and your course is worth 500 points total, you cannot build that using a points grading scheme. What Canvas would do is essentially convert the points that you award in your activities to percentages and then align those percentages with a letter grade. So you'll still want to build a custom grading scheme using the percentage option, give it a descriptive name so you know that it is aligned with your syllabus and that it is your specific grading scheme. You are the only one who has access to your grading scheme. They're not posted at the site level. So you don't have to worry. This just belongs to you. You can import this grading scheme into future courses as well. So if you build it once, it should follow you through every course import. As a reminder, our system Banner does not accept grades higher than an A, so you cannot give an A+. And Canvas might let you build in an A+, but you're not actually going to be able to submit that grade to Banner. And so we want our upper limit to be an A, down to an F, and then you determine if you need to add more ranges. Maybe you don't give pluses and minuses. You can delete those from the grading scheme. And notice how these percentages are automatically realigning for me as I delete different entries, right? Are they not? Nope, they didn't. I thought they were. Disregard that. You will have to rebuild these yourself. So that's a custom grading scheme. This is what students will see in their grade book. This is what is going to get pulled into Grade Passback and then eventually passed into Banner for final grade submissions. Which leads me to the last piece, which is Grade Passback. This is a fairly new integration between Canvas and Banner. My example is not going to look exactly like what you will see because the students we have enrolled in this course are not real students. And so we're seeing some error messages because Canvas or Grade Passback knows that these students don't have a 790 number. They don't exist in Banner. And so you shouldn't see these types of error messages in your course. But what you will see is the student's current grade listed both as a percentage and a letter grade. This is the letter grade that's getting pulled in from that grading scheme that we've already applied. They'll show the final grade. It will show this grade that you submitted to the SIS, which stands for Student Information System, which is Banner in this case. And you can use this Grade Passback tool to send all of your final grades into Banner. This tool works as soon as the grading portal opens in Banner and works through the editing period, which for this semester, that grades are due on Tuesday, May 13th at 11:59 p.m. and Wednesday, May 14th is the editing period. And so you can send grades to Banner. And during that time frame, if you did need to revise grades for individual students or for the full course, you can do that directly in Grade Passback and resend your grades. And you would send them by clicking the submit button. One thing to note with Grade Passback, I'm going to jump back to our grade book quickly. And I'm going to open the setting, Advanced, allow final grade override. What this means is, Canvas is going to calculate a student's overall course grade based on how you have your point set, your assignment group set. And if you check this column, it will add an override column in the grade book, and you can manually override that grade. So say a student earned a B, but you want to give them a B+, you can input that into the Canvas gradebook. However, the final grade override does not work with Grade Passback, which is unfortunate, but Grade Passback will not recognize this override column from the gradebook. I'm going to scroll all the way to the end of my gradebook. So here's that override column. Students will see this, but Passback is pulling from the total column. And so just be mindful, if you are going to override final grades, Passback won't work for you. We still have the original way to submit grades in Banner, so you can do that manually. And I believe you can upload a spreadsheet to post grades in bulk. I'm not super familiar with that process, but those options still do exist, even though we now have Grade Passback available. So that concludes my first section on completing grading and reviewing the gradebook, assigning extra credit, checking grading scheme, and submitting grades using Grade Passback. Are there any quick questions at this time before I move on to incompletes? No. All right. So processing incompletes. Now this is something you can also do in Grade Passback. So while that loads, you would essentially change the final grade from a letter grade to an I, which represents incomplete. It is going to ask you to list the letter grade that the student would earn if they never finished that incomplete. So maybe the student has a C in the class at this point in time. You would post the C there. That is not going to the grade book just yet. To the student's transcript. So that incomplete final grade is not getting sent into the transcript. It's the incomplete, that I, that would actually be sent. But University of Montana policy requires that incompletes are completed within 1 year of the semester ending. If a student does not finish their missing work, they do not meet the expectations of that incomplete, then their transcript will revert to whatever their final grade would have been if the incomplete was not issued. So with these incompletes, you would give the student a grade of an incomplete, but then you have to work with Online to get your course set up to actually allow the student to finish their missing work within this Canvas shell. There is a specific help ticket you'll submit. I'm going to open it in our Solutions Center. Just let me find it. The link from our faculty support page on our website. So this Canvas service request. I'm going to open here. This is our Solutions Center. This shows all of the specific Canvas tickets you have available to you. With my example, you're going to see some that only instructional designers have access to. But you will scroll to find this Canvas student incomplete ticket. There's some overview information that I suggest you read before you submit the ticket, but essentially you're going to need to provide the course name, the CRN, year and semester, student name or names, UMIDs, 790 numbers, and expected completion date. The default is 1 year, but you have the authority to require your student to complete their incomplete in a shorter time frame. So maybe you only want to give them 1 extra month or 4 extra months. You'll specify that date in this ticket, and you'll initiate the ticket by clicking Request Service. The way incompletes work is we will build a new section in your original course to accommodate students who are issued a grade of incomplete. I'm going to demonstrate this shortly, but for now I just want to show more of the specifics. So course name, CRN, and semester, all of this is found in your course. You should be able to grab it from your course short name up there. Where's my ticket? Course URL. URL is referring to the link, the web link of your course. So you can go to your course homepage and copy and paste this URL into the ticket. Student names and 790 numbers. If you are offering an incomplete to multiple students and that each student has the same final deadline, so maybe both students have a full year, both students have 4 months, you could submit 1 ticket for all students as long as they're operating under that same incomplete time frame. Here's where you put end date if the end date is less than the default of 1 year, and then any additional details or attachments you would need to provide to your or submit to your ticket. You can submit these tickets now. They will not be processed until the day after grades are due. So I mentioned that we build a separate section in your course to administer student completes. That allows us to provide maintained access to the students who need access to content while not keeping the course open for everyone else who has already completed it. I'll show you. Now, this isn't, again, this is something we will do for you, but I just want to show you that in your course, you can still preview the different sections that are created within your course. In this example, we have 3 separate sections: our webinar demo course, webinar demo course A, and webinar demo course B. Your incomplete section will have the word incomplete in capital letters in front of it. So it'll be really easy for you to distinguish that specific section. And this is important because you are going to have to modify due dates and assign to basically activity availability. You'll have to modify that for this specific incomplete section. And I'll show you how to do that. So I'm going to go, just going to pull up my assignments index. And let's say my student who got an incomplete needs to complete assignment chapter 1. I'm going to use the assign to feature. And rather than assign to everyone, I'm going to choose my specific section. Let's just say this webinar demo course A section is my incomplete section. Notice that you can choose everyone, individual sections, groups, or individual students in this assign to feature. So when administering these incompletes, it's very important that you choose the specific incomplete section, and then you are going to set new due dates, new available from dates, and new available until dates. This ensures that only the students who have been officially issued a grade of an incomplete have the opportunity to resubmit work at a later date. So that is something you will have to do for every activity that the students must complete after the semester has concluded. Cancel out of that. Ooh, really? Okay, so that is the end of my section on processing incompletes. Are there any questions before we move on to understanding course availability? Okay, so course availability. I'm going to open course settings to show you some special dates. This participation setting is what opens and closes your course in Canvas. Now, you don't have the ability to edit these dates at all. They are set based on the semester in which your course is offered. So we have participation of term, and we specifically in this example have the spring semester 2025 term selected. And so that's pulling in start dates of January 16th. That was the first day of classes. And the end date is the last day that you can edit grades in the grading portal. Note that this is not the last day of finals. And that was done intentionally to allow students to submit work up until the day grades are due, if you wanted to allow students to submit work late. This does not mean you have to accept work up until May 14th. But you may have a situation where a student has one missing assignment and you don't necessarily want to go through the steps to issue the incomplete. You know the student can finish it with just a little extra time. So this does allow you to accept work late after finals end without having to issue a grade of incomplete. So this is updated each semester to account for the grading period deadline. Now, this is after this date, students can no longer participate in a course, and participation means submitting work. So student participation ends as soon as that final grading deadline passes. Teachers, the teacher role maintains the ability to edit content and actively work on a course for 1 year past the term end date. That time frame aligns with the maximum time frame to allow an incomplete to be finished. And so ideally, we're not editing too much content in a course that's ended. We want the course to remain as an archive of what you actually taught that semester. But in the case of issuing an incomplete, you are going to have to get in there and change due dates and grade work. And so you will have that editing access for 1 year following the end of the term. Now, these term dates are going to look a little different than the section dates. These section dates are pulled in from Banner in an actual CRN-based course, and this webinar demo is not a CRN-based course. These section dates will still have an end date of the last day of finals. When that end date passes, so in this case, we're talking, what is it, May 9th, next Friday? Yes, May 9th. The course is going to move into past enrollments. And this can cause some confusion for students and instructors. and that it will no longer be listed on your course dashboard under published or unpublished, but that doesn't mean it disappeared entirely. You just have to go to a different place to find it, which would be your courses list. And if you choose all courses, I don't know. Oh, yeah, here's a good example. Great. It'll show under your past enrollments. And so as teachers, you can open past enrollments and you can edit for up to 1 year. Students can view grades, view course content, view discussions and assignment, and send messages to the instructor. They cannot view quiz questions. They cannot answer or submit discussions, assignments, or quizzes, or other activities once, at least once that final grade deadline has passed. So for that brief, what would it be, 5-day period between finals ending and grades being due, students can still submit, but the course will show under past enrollments. Any questions about understanding course availability? Great. Okay, so our last section before we could open it up to more questions is limiting content availability for students. So let me go back into my webinar demo. And in Canvas, a course that has student submissions cannot be unpublished. Activities that have student submissions cannot be unpublished. So we cannot unpublish a quiz, an assignment, a discussion if students have submitted to it. We cannot unpublish a full course. And unlike in Moodle, the courses are not automatically hidden at the end of the semester. You still can control what your students access at the end of the semester. If you don't change anything, then students will be able to view everything that was published during the semester. But if you do want to limit content availability, once the semester ended, the best approach is to hide items from the course navigation menu. To do that, we would go to settings. Actually, before I do that, let me show you what it currently looks like to students. So I'm going to use view as student. And you'll see that students at this point in time can view the homepage, syllabus, grades, modules, Microsoft OneDrive, and people. But you don't want them to see anything. The course is over. So we would go into settings, choose navigation, and we will drag and drop whatever we don't want students to access at this point. So this top group is what's visible in course navigation. The bottom group is what's hidden in course navigation. I don't want students to see anything once the semester has ended. Except for maybe I want them to still see their grades. So I'm going to pull everything down except for home and grades. And we have to scroll all the way down to click save. So notice the course navigation menu has changed. As the instructor, you can still see all of these items. But if I go to view as student, they can only see the home page and grades. And so you'll want to think about what you want your students to be able to see once the semester's ended. Maybe you do want to hide grades from them. Maybe you encourage them to keep a record of their grades elsewhere. Hiding grades doesn't mean grades disappear. So you still have access to them. You can still view them. Students will still see their final grade on their transcript once grades get posted. So that's one approach. And that's really helpful, again, if you want to hide access to activities that have student submissions, since you cannot unpublish them. Another approach is to change the availability dates for activities. So let me open an assignment for an example. So our availability dates are set using the Assign To feature. And available from is when the assignment first becomes available, or students can actually submit and look at the assignment. So you can choose to set this available from dates like some point like really far in the future. Just randomly May 2027. So that will also lock students out from being able to access some, or at least submit. I think this works really well for quizzes. With this available from dates set so far in the future, I believe students can still see. Oh no, they can't. Okay, disregard that. So that's one approach. It's a bit more work involved because you would have to go through to every assignment and change those individual settings. But maybe that is going to work better for you. So it's still an option, either changing the available from dates or modifying your course navigation menu to only show what you want students to have continued access to. Oh, thank you, Jean. You just pointed out there's a bulk edit option. That's great. So another thing to disregard in what I had just said is that you don't have to do that individually. You can do it in bulk if you did want to change the available from dates. So still the same two options, both relatively easy to implement. Now, content that can be unpublished. Let me just make my modules visible again real quick by going to navigation, dragging modules up into the top group, and scrolling down to click save. I'm going to open my modules and just show you that individual content pages can be unpublished. You can determine what can or can't be unpublished by looking at the is opacity the right word? The hue? Hue is not the right word. Shading, perhaps, but notice that we have a dark green circle on this discussions guideline page, and we have a lighter green circle on the course Q&A. And if I hover my mouse over that light green circle, I see that I can't unpublish if there are student submissions. So that different color indicates that this activity does in fact contain student submissions and I can't unpublish it. But I can unpublish any content page because pages are just content built with the rich text editor. They're not used to collect any sort of student submissions. You can also unpublish a module. I selected to unpublish module and all items, but it didn't unpublish my Q&A, which is what we expected. But if this module is not published, then students still can't see that course Q&A. It was in the Getting Started module, and I don't see that anywhere in my module view now. So there are multiple ways that you can limit content availability in your student or to your students once the course ends. And one of the bigger differences here between Canvas and Moodle is this is something you will have to do for each course, each semester, and we will not be putting courses in, we will not be hiding courses for faculty like we were able to do in Moodle. And it's really just because we can't do that in Canvas. The same functionality doesn't exist.